let's talk careers, shall we? Hey everyone, welcome back to the iGaming experience. I'm Sam Batty, your host, here in the Zebra Studios in Podgorica, Montenegro, as I normally am. And today, as I said, I want to talk to you about careers in iGaming. I'll give you my thoughts on how they progress, or at least how they could, why they rarely track in the way people expect them to. It's a dynamic industry. New opportunities are popping up all the time, and old ones are constantly changing. And it can be very hard to wrap your head around if you're looking at it from the outside. So I will do my best to walk you through it. Okay. This episode is more for people who are brand new to the industry. But you will get some benefit even if you've been in the game for a little while. All right. So maybe you're just thinking about getting into iGaming and you're listening to this episode. Maybe you've just joined your first company. Maybe you've been in for a year or two or more and you're wondering what's next. Maybe you know where you want to go, but you don't know how to get there. If that's you, I want to reassure you right away. Feeling like your career path is messy or unclear in iGaming in particular is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. In fact, I would even say in life, sometimes it's fun to take the adventurous route and maybe not go the set path, but that's a whole other podcast, to be honest. So back to iGaming. I would say if you've got that uncertain feeling, it's usually a sign that you're doing exactly what a lot of successful people in this industry have done. There's a lot of different entry paths into this industry, and it doesn't necessarily correlate to how successful you are in the long run, based on your background and how you got here. So have faith, right? There is hope. So one of the first things you need to understand is that, as I was just kind of saying, iGaming isn't a traditional industry. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's no obvious university degree that leads you into it, at least not that I know of. Maybe in Las Vegas, there's a couple of courses there specifically for it. But when it comes to iGaming in particular, I'd be very surprised. There's no clean ladder where you move from junior to mid to senior in nice, neat steps. Most people working in iGaming, I would say, for the most part, didn't plan to end up here at all. Right? People come in from tech or marketing or finance. You have people with customer support backgrounds, legal people, that know about compliance. You have just people who are into sports. That would lead a lot of people into some of the different sports betting backgrounds. You've got salespeople as well. Salespeople are massive in this industry, and that tends to not, that's a skill that tends to jump across industries quite easily. So you get a lot of talented salespeople that show up. You have people like myself, actually, who their first taste of this was land-based casinos. So I don't really talk about it that much, but I used to be a card dealer, or a croupier, as some parts of the world would call it, on the west coast of Canada for about a year and a half, and it was super fun. One of my favorite jobs I've ever had, and in fact, I'll maybe talk about that in another episode if I ever decide to go a little bit deeper into some of my exact experiences. But yeah, you get people from all over, right? It can be from all types of industries, sometimes completely unrelated backgrounds. And what I think most of us in iGaming have in common is that we didn't follow a blueprint. That might be changing now for some younger people that maybe grow up in Malta or in Yerevan or Cyprus or certain parts of the United States where these hubs are forming for iGaming. And, the industry's been around for 20 plus years now. But for most people, the industry was somehow put in front of them, let's say. and they really learned their skills by being in the game itself. So if you're listening to this and thinking you don't have the right background, that's probably not true. iGaming values transferable skills far more than perfect credentials. I mean, what even are perfect credentials in this industry? What matters is how quickly you can learn and adapt and understand how the entire system works. And that will help you understand where your skills are best applied. But let me slow it down a little bit, kind of jumping ahead there. When you're trying to plan out your career and you're thinking about what you ultimately want to hit, the rooms that you want to be invited into, the titles that you want to have, just dial it back a little bit, slow it down. Most people don't start in glamorous roles. They start where there's friction, where there's need. I would say a great starting point is in customer support. I've heard some great stories of people who have started in customer support. Honestly, that's one of the best entry points you can have. You learn how players behave, not just what the management and product decks say about how they behave. You actually get to see it firsthand. You see the bugs in the tech. You see the confusion from, either players or your colleagues. Any payment issues, those come your way. And you'll learn a lot about bonuses as well. There can be misunderstandings all over the place. And all that stuff actually matters. That's key information, key experience that you can really only get by doing. Right? You have some others that would start in CRM or marketing. You might remember from several episodes, but maybe from the iGaming 101 episode I did on jargon. CRM stands for Customer Resource Management, basically a database of your players and, in iGaming with specific tools to help you interact with them. Go ahead and listen to iGaming 101 if you don't know what I'm talking about. So, coming from the CRM or marketing side of things, those people will get a real crash course in player psychology very quickly. You'll learn what motivates people. You'll learn what annoys them, and what, most importantly, keeps them coming back, which the industry term there is retention, right? The players that have signed up to your site and keep on coming back, right? Then you have some people who enter through QA, right? Quality assurance or some other junior tech role. And in that one, I think people get their eyes open a little bit to how fragile these systems can actually be. And especially if they have a tech background from another industry, they would get used to edge cases not being edge cases in iGaming. They're more normal. The unexpected happens all of the time. I know it's super cliche, but you really do have to expect the unexpected. All right. And then, you've got, as I mentioned, people that are coming through marketing, right? Affiliates, or you've got people that have payments or risk management or compliance skills, right? Every one of those roles teaches you a different slice of the system. Okay. The important thing to understand is this. Your first job in iGaming is not your destiny. It's just your entry point. This is a dynamic industry. I'll say it 1,000 times. So there's plenty of room for movement. I'll get into that in the rest of this podcast. iGaming careers, for the most part, feel very non-linear. Right? The industry is still evolving and companies are forming all the time with different verticals and different target markets and different companies that they're trying to sell to. And across these companies, you'll find there's some commonalities, but sometimes some key differences, right? Job titles don't always mean the same thing everywhere, right? A project manager at one company might be super strategic, and at another, they might be closer to like a project coordinator, right? Or like you might have a head of CRM in within one operator that is completely technical and data driven. They're just looking at the numbers. In another, they might focus almost entirely on the feel of it and the human element and campaign execution. All of these roles require some crossover knowledge to do them well. That's the key right there. Crossover knowledge, expanding your understanding of how everything works. Everything in iGaming is connected. I've done a rant like this before in a few episodes ago. Tech is kind of at the heart of everything. I know I'm the CTO, so obviously I'm biased, but tech really is the big driver behind iGaming. This is all online. It influences product. Product influences marketing. Marketing influences bonuses. Bonuses influence risk. Risk influences compliance. And compliance influences everything. Right? So you can see how the dominoes might fall, how the web is all connected. And once you understand more than one of those areas, right, you're going to slide into one of those areas. But once you start to learn more of that, you naturally start drifting sideways, let's say. And that sideways movement is often where the real growth actually happens. That's where you build a knowledge base outside of your immediate role. It prepares you for the unexpected. There's an expression actually that I love. I say this all the time in different ways. And this expression defines luck as the intersection of preparation and opportunity. Well, opportunity in iGaming, just like the rest of life, that often appears suddenly. You don't get a warning, right? A new market opens, a regulation changes, a product launches, right? A team restructures or somebody leaves. A lot can happen. People who are curious and reliable and already have context for other roles and other responsibilities often step into those new roles and responsibilities before they even realize that they're quote unquote moving up. That's how you jump levels in this industry, or at least that's one way to do it. And let me specify something. It doesn't have to be moving up as in moving up on the org chart. A sideways move is a major door opener. Just need a little bit of patience. This is, I would say, a big mental adjustment for a lot of people, especially if you're coming from a more traditional corporate background where the path to the top is a lot clearer. In iGaming, moving sideways is very often how you move up. Someone might start in support and move into product, or start in CRM and move into retention strategy. From the outside, it can look random, but from the inside, it's extremely logical because that person understands more of the system than they did before. Depth is what they get. Depth is valuable, but breadth is powerful, right? So when I'm talking depth, I'm talking going deep on one specific thing, whereas breadth takes in the expanse of everything that you know. And breadth is what tends to unlock senior roles later on. We're talking about jumping up the org chart. Breadth is what allows you to be cross-departmental. It gives you a better ability to think strategically when you see the whole picture, right? At the end of the day, it puts you in a better position to drive your project to success. And I would say one of my favorite words here, something we should all be striving for, is it makes you undeniable, regardless of your role or your title or your responsibilities. And, let's talk about titles, because this is where a lot of unnecessary stress comes from. And I know it's easy to say because I've got a nice fancy title, or at least I think it's fancy. But just take note, okay? In iGaming, titles are inconsistent. Kind of as I was saying earlier, there's new companies forming all the time with different departments and different ways that they name things, right? So a senior title at one company can mean something completely different at another, right? A head of role in a small operator, that might be very hands-on, right? You might be the head of a department, but that department may be you and like one other person who's also the head of something else. And you're getting your hands dirty all day trying to get work done. Right. Now, on the flip side, in a larger group, with a larger company, a head of role might be entirely strategic. Right. They might not actually have to execute on anything. It might be more about coming up with strategy and then laying it out for their team and then, following up and managing how that goes. So that's not really what matters. What actually matters is the problems you solve, right? The responsibility you can handle and whether people trust you to make good decisions and, most importantly, to follow through. If you chase titles too early, you will often skip experiences that actually make those titles meaningful later, if that makes sense. Right? Skills compound, context compounds, right? Just let that process happen. Let it grow organically, right? Put in the work, but there's only so much rushing that you can do. You have to let things marinate, right? So if you just do that, you're following with the effort, and you're really trying to add value, then you will be surprised at the titles and the money that follows, right? But just trust me when I say initially, especially, it's not as important as you think. In fact, when I think about the companies I've worked at, there's always at least one or two people, maybe more, that had junior to mid-level roles and titles that were clearly contributing beyond their title, right? They are the people, and if you're listening to this, you know who you are. They are the people that have DMs with people 2 or 3 spots up from them on the org chart, right? They are the people that management rely on to actually get things done, right? They are also the first people to be offered new opportunities, right? I'm sure a lot of you listening right now have a person that came to mind right away. That's your get it done colleague. I know I've got a handful in my head right now that I can think of that were essential in not only the company's success, but in mine as well. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna shoot all these guys a thank you note right after this recording. You guys do the same. Pause right now, and send that person a message, whoever that person is, because there's one in every company, and just let them know you appreciate them, right? And even better, be that person. Right? When I mentioned being undeniable earlier, this is basically what I meant. Be that person. Be the one that when people know they need something done and it's important, you're the first call. Be that person. Right? And let me be even more specific. When you look at people who progress well in iGaming, there's a few common traits. And this goes along with everything I was just saying. Number one, they're curious, right? They want to understand how things work, the way that they do. They're not just trying to complete the task. They're actually interested in solving the problem by understanding the problem, not by treating symptoms. They want to get to the root of it. Okay. Number two, they're reliable. So important. When they say they'll do something, they do it. That matters way more than the beauty of what they've done, right? Whether it's flashy or brilliant or whatever, just getting it done is so massive. Okay. What was number three? Number three is context. Kind of the theme of this whole episode. They develop context. And that helps them understand how decisions in one area affects another, right? They're able to zoom out and see the big picture easily. And lastly on this, I would say they communicate well, especially across departments. iGaming is so connected. We cannot operate the departments in silos. People need to be able to understand, at least on a high level, what the other guys are doing. And being able to explain something that's complex in a simple language is, I mean, I was about to say a huge advantage in this industry, but it's beyond an advantage. It's an essential skill for leveling up, I would say, especially in my role, as CTO. I'm in many parts of my day a bridge between the tech team and other stakeholders that are less technical. And a major part of my job is being able to explain to people what it is that we're doing, why that we're doing it, why it's beneficial. And there's, people from board members to the CEO to operations, everyone's needs a little bit of this information or a lot of it, depending on who they are, and being able to communicate that, right? Not just from the tech side, but from any department, being able to educate other people, make them aware, will make the whole machine run smoother, right? And people like that as well, they build real working relationships, right, over time, but they're real. This is not, they're not networking in a transactional way, right? They're building genuine trust through collaboration and showing up, putting in the effort. And in fact, that's also why conferences and summits matter so much. I did an episode recently on attending your first summit, which definitely worth checking out if you're going to be diving into this industry. I think regardless of your role, everyone should attend at least one major iGaming summit. So yeah, check out that episode if you want some more information on how to get the most out of that. All right, I've got a couple more points before wrapping up. This is a big one. One of the hardest parts of being new to iGaming is comparison. You see people announcing promotions or new titles or new roles or joining new companies, and it's easy to feel like you're behind. As I keep saying, this industry moves very fast. But what you don't see, and this isn't just iGaming, this is just life. What you don't see is the context, right? The timing, the mistakes, the sideways moves that didn't work out, right? The times they got themselves, to go back to my analogy or my little saying, they got all the way on up to Opportunity Street, but they still had some distance to cover on Preparation Avenue, right? Before they got to that intersection of quote unquote luck. If you're learning and you're adding responsibility and becoming more useful, you're progressing. Just know that. Even if it doesn't look as impressive on paper, even if you don't have a great title or something to post, just know that you're progressing if you're doing those things. And honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, you're on the right track, right? Not just this podcast. I would say any iGaming podcast. It's a niche of a niche of a niche. And it says a lot about you. It means you're trying to increase your knowledge and value. Doing all the things, I think that I was just saying, or at least a major portion of it. In fact, you're not only listening to this podcast, but you're still listening this far into the episode. If that's the case, which obviously it is because you're hearing me saying this, you're guaranteed to level up. So many people would have dropped off by now, but your patience and your tenacity, it will pay off. I'm telling you, it will. And here's the mindset that I would encourage you to adopt. Right now, I can speak just between us. Right, most of the other guys have dropped off, so this is for the hardcores now. Don't rush your first role. Focus on learning the product deeply, whatever your product is. Secondly, understand how money moves. I've done episodes on this as well. Okay, understand how money moves. You need to understand how bonuses work and also how players behave, right? And even better is look at the rules, right? The different regulations or the rules, not just within regulators and in different geos, but also for your own business, the country that you're in, the constraints that you have based on the particular product, and ask questions. Why do those rules exist? That will really open doors and open your mind, right? It'll help you to build relationships in and outside of your company by doing that research. And it'll allow you to be in line for opportunities that maybe don't match your original plan. Just be open to it. And I guess most importantly, this is pretty much the last thing I'll say, is don't panic if your career doesn't look neat and tidy. We're in iGaming. This is an adventure. It's not supposed to look neat and tidy. It's supposed to be fun and exciting. Okay? Long-term success in iGaming isn't about following a perfect path. I mean, it could be for some people, but I have a feeling, as I said, if you're still here, that's not what you're looking for, right? It's more about becoming someone who understands the system and exercises good judgment and adapts to change. And something that I've not touched on enough, but I think the gist of it came across, is someone who helps others succeed. That is so big, right? And one of the main reasons why I do this podcast is because I'm trying to help other people succeed. I'm trying to become more successful myself at the same time, but trying to share what I know, and hopefully there's some benefits that will come to other people and come on back to me. Let's keep it real here. All right. So here's the takeaway. If your path feels nonlinear, a little bit up and downs, a little bit of sideways movement, a little bit of jumps back and forth, you're probably doing it right. At least for me, right? We've all got different appetites for risk, but if there's a little bit of bumps and bruises, and you're sliding into home plate with some dust on your uniform, then you're doing it right. Okay. This industry rewards curiosity and adaptability and people who genuinely want to understand how things work and make them better. For real. I know that sounds idealistic, but if you just keep that as your focus, you're going to have a lot of success in this industry, right? So focus on learning, focus on relationships, focus on becoming more and more useful, focus on being reliable, and the rest usually works itself out. You do you, right? Okay. That's it. Thanks for listening to the iGaming Experience. I'm your host, Sam Batty. As always, coming to you from the Zebra Studios here in absolutely stunning, beautiful Podgorica, Montenegro. And P.S., shout out to all of the international listeners, getting quite a few more in the United States, which is super cool. And picking up in Malta quite a bit. And Hong Kong, got quite a few listeners there now, or at least getting a few listens. Maybe it's one very dedicated person listening over and over again. But yeah, shout out to everyone around the world that's trying to level up in their iGaming careers and just in their life in general. I will talk to you in the next episode.